We have an interesting guest today. We have Jesse Scott. Jesse is a third-year law student at the University of Toledo Law School. He's the current managing editor of the University of Toledo Law Review. He is a law clerk at our law firm, and he has a fascinating background. He's had a lot of obstacles in his life. And the interesting thing is every one of those obstacles in the short term was bad, but in the long term turned out to actually be an opportunity. So he's a perfect example of if life hands you a lemon, make lemonade out of it. And oftentimes the bad things in our life turn out to be the best things in our life. Jesse, I'm glad you're with us today.
Glad to be here, Chuck. Thank you.
Okay. So why don't you start out? Tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, your family situation and everything, and then get us to high school, and then we'll talk about high school.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a wild ride from the beginning. I'm from Southern Ohio, Scioto County. Everybody thinks Joe Burrow is Southern Ohio. Well, he's Athens. That's still pretty far north by my standards. I'm right on the Kentucky, West Virginia, Ohio tri-state area. So you have a really strong meshing of cultures. You think West Virginia, you think of coal mines. You think Kentucky, you think the same, and then Ohio, you don't really associate that too much. But it's very similar in culture, very similar in socioeconomic status, very similar in economic outlook. So I was the only child. Parents both went to high school, and that was as far as in education as they got. And that's very, very common for that area. Most people don't make it out. Most people don't have the means or even the ability to go get a college education or even get out of the area. So, one thing that I always remember my parents telling me the entire time I was growing up was, if you want to be rich or you want to live well, go get a college education. Looking back, that's kind of funny because, you and I both know that just the college degree does not equate riches and success, but that's something that was always instilled into me. My mother stayed home to kind of take care of me, take care of the house, and my dad would work as much as he could. And the entire time growing up until the last handful of years, it was not a dead end job, but it wasn't a job or a career that really provided a vigorating lifestyle. And that's the common theme for a lot of people in that area is you're just working paycheck to paycheck. You look at things well in advance. You need to buy a new pair of work boots, or that winter's coming up, so you need to buy a new coat. That's something you start budgeting for months in advance, because whenever that cold weather rolls around, you just don't have the luxury of walking into the store and buying it. It's something you have to plan well in advance. And that's the same for a lot of things. I can remember one year I needed a pair of equipment for sports, and that was something that had to be really thought about. Was, well, how do we buy this? It's not from a lack of effort. It's not from a lack of work. It's not from a lack of want. It's just the way that life is and the situation a lot of people in that area find themselves in.
So it sounds like you weren't born on third base.
No, definitely not. My parents will probably end up listening to this podcast, and they may get a little upset with me, but it's wild to think about and look at. I can remember not having a lot of things, and I thought that was normal. You get used to a certain lifestyle, and you think that's the norm, and then you go to a friend's house or you go to an after-school program, and you're like, wow, this person has XYZ. This is so cool. They must be so affluent. And it's just not the case. It's just, what you're used to and what's normal for you.
It sounds like your parents taught you, if you were going to become successful, it was up to you.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that everybody's life is in their hands. Some people have a little bit more of an advantage. Some people have a lot more advantage, actually. I mean, let's be frank. And you can kind of make whatever you want out of your life, barring some other factors. But for the average individual, you can do whatever you want. And that's something my parents always told me. You're not limited, just because you're born in Southern Ohio, up a holler in a trailer. That's not what you're limited to. You can do whatever you want. You can go be a school teacher. You can be an attorney. You can be a doctor. You just have to go after it and get it. And that's something that they always told me, and it's something I've really taken to heart, and it's something that's provided very well for me so far in my life. Yes.
So in high school, I know you've explained to me that you thought your way out was you were going to be a college football player and that was going to pay for your education. And maybe tell our listeners what position you played and how big you were in high school.
Yeah, so that's a good question because it gets me able to talk on a few things. I knew I wanted to go to college, but I had no way to pay for it. I had no idea what a FAFSA was. I had no idea what student loans were. I mean, hell, I barely knew what college was. I knew that's where you went to go learn something. And that's what I thought all the way until I was a senior in high school. So you can't really tell on camera, but I'm a fairly large guy. I'm 6'4", about 280 now. But back in high school, I was still 6'4", but I was pushing about 300 pounds. And, as I started entering high school, freshman, sophomore years, the football coach was like, hey, you're a big kid. You should come play. You might like it. You might get to go to college for it. It's like, oh, great, college. That's where I want to go. So I really invested myself in learning the sport, learning how to play the sport, and just being big and strong. I was an offensive lineman. That's where they stick us big guys at. Just kind of go in there and fight in those trenches. So I viewed that as my way of kind of breaking out. If I trained in the weight room, if I trained on the field, and truly became a disciple of my sport, my position, that was my way of getting out of Southern Ohio to go learn and go experience and grow as an individual. If I come back, great. If not, awesome too. So that was the goal, and that really worked out for a while. I was being scouted. I ended up with a lot of honors on the field, but unfortunately, in my senior season, very first game of the year, had a knee injury. Fourth quarter punt return, it was terrible. And as you can probably speculate, nobody wants to take a offensive lineman with a bum knee. That's one of the first things that goes on us big guys, and to already have that injured prior to college is a real turnoff for an athlete.
So were you looking at that time? Do you think you would have been potentially like a MAC level recruit?
Yeah, it's ironic. I ended up in Toledo anyways. I took a few visits. The University of Toledo football team came there for their junior day and a couple before and between that senior year. Akron as well. Marshall down in West Virginia, I had some interest from them. And then I had a couple of Division II, Division III schools reached out in that time as well. So yeah, I would consider myself a MAC level recruit. Wasn't good enough for the Big Ten or SEC, but I mean, MAC football is very competitive. We get a lot of athletes from the MAC level go pro anyways.
And you're from Portsmouth, Ohio, and I know that Chuck Ely was from Portsmouth Notre Dame High School, and he's probably considered the greatest player ever at the University of Toledo.
Yeah, and he just got inducted to the College Football Hall of Fame a couple weeks ago. So yeah, I mean, he's right from Portsmouth Notre Dame, very close to where I went to high school at. Very, very similar area.
So all of a sudden you realized, oh my God, my dream of going to college has disappeared. And I'm assuming that was kind of difficult for you for a while.
It was devastating. You spend, I mean, at the time, your entire life. I mean, I was 17 at the time, so 3, 4, 5 years seems like your entire life. Banking on this one thing to happen, banking on this being my way out, this being my way to pay for this. And to literally see that flash before your eyes and go away it's really tough. You got to start thinking about other things, instead of thinking about, am I going to play well next Friday night? It's, oh man, how high can I get my ACT score in the next few weeks, next few months? How much can I improve my GPA in the next few weeks, few months, so that I can be as competitive for any merit-based scholarships that may be available?
And one of the things that you and I have talked about is, if you had been a successful football player at even the MAC level or Division II level, realistically, that's a full-time job. And academically, you would not have had the time to really concentrate on academics.
Right. It's at the time, I'm 26 now. So, 8-9 years ago, it was really, really unfortunate. But in retrospect, I'm glad it happened. I really am. Had I went and played 4 years at the NCAA level, I would not have learned as much as I have. I would not have had the life experiences that I've had, because I would have been a full-time ball player, part-time student. And that's great if you want to make it to the NFL. That's great if your only aspirations are to play college ball, and then go out and coach. And I knew I probably wasn't going to the NFL, and I had no aspirations of being a coach. So for that to kind of falter and go to the wayside worked out really well for me.
Okay, so why don't you tell us, how did you end up paying for college?
I enrolled at Shawnee State University, which is the state university right in Portsmouth, Ohio. It's a relatively new university. It's fairly small. Let's be honest, it was cheap, very cheap. So I enrolled there. I find out real quick what student loans are. Find out real quick, what those interest rates are. And I had no idea how to apply for scholarships, had no idea how to negotiate with universities, try to get more financial aid and scholarships. So I start my first semester and I'm working. I had worked at a local fast food place from sophomore year of high school all the way to now, just trying to pay for gas, pay for license registrations, pay for things that you need as an adult, even when you're in high school. And I realized that it's not going to cut it. Rent's expensive, food's expensive, textbooks are expensive. So in these impoverished areas where there's not a lot of things to take advantage of, and there's not a lot of job prospects, and there's just not a lot of resources, what do? Well, you go to the local Armed Forces Career Center. Ironically, there was one about 2 blocks away from Shawnee State University. So I walk in, and there was only one recruiter present from any of the branches. It was an Army guy. So I sat down, I talked to him. And at this point, I'd already completed my first semester of undergrad. I had my transcripts with me. I was like, hey, man, I got to figure out how to pay for this. Here's my background a little bit. Here's my transcripts. What can we do? And pretty shortly after that, I found myself signing on the dotted line and enlisting the Army Reserve for a total of 8 years.
That's something. I mean, you signed away 8 years. That's a long time.
Yeah, it's funny you put it like that. At the time, you're just trying to find, like, how do I pay for this college? How do I put a little bit of money in my pocket at the time? And you don't really think about, well, in 8 years from now, what will I be doing? I can tell you what I was doing, because that 8-year mark just hit a year ago for me. So I was 2 years through law school. I was working, and already had a couple deployments under my belt, a couple overseas trips. So it is kind of wild to think about signing away for 8 years. But when you want to do something and it's a means to an end, that's just what you do.
So explain a little bit for the audience about your military experience and then your school experience. And it sounded like, that it turned out somewhat different than what you originally thought it was going to be.
Yeah. It's a fun question. when you think of the military, you think of Call of Duty, you think of the video games, running and gunning, kicking indoors, doing all the cool guy stuff. So when I enlisted, as I mentioned, I had brought the recruiter my transcripts. I had already taken the ASVAB, which is kind of like the aptitude test you take to even get into the military. I had taken that back in high school, to be honest, just get out of class for an afternoon. And I scored really high. I had a 4.0 on my transcript in college. My ASVAB score was really high. So he was like, hey, have you ever thought about psychological operations? Man, I've never even heard of psychological operations. I don't know what to think about it. And, the recruiter explained to me this really interesting thing. You're deployed with these Ranger teams. You're running, you're gunning, you're kicking indoors. You're basically special forces. For anybody in our audience who has a military background, you're probably chuckling at this typical recruiter lines. And probably most importantly, PSYOP is not all of that. It's much more. So kind of get back to your question, Chuck. I enlisted and I went to basic training very shortly after signing. So the training pipeline for the Army is you spend 10 weeks in basic training, usually in Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Leonard, Missouri, or even down in South Carolina at Fort Jackson. I went to Missouri. So I was there for 10 weeks, and that's just where you learn basic soldiering skills, how to wear a uniform, how to march, how to do a lot of push-ups and sit-ups and running. Just your basic training, it's exactly what it sounds like. From there, based on what job you signed for with the recruiter, you go to your advanced training. So since I enlisted as a psychological operations specialist, I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for an additional 12 weeks to receive PSYOP-specific training. So I do all that. It's essentially a semester and a half off of school. I finish my training obligations. I come back home. I'm in a drilling status since I'm a reservist. So that just means I would go to drill once a month for usually 2 to 3, 4 days, a couple of weeks here and there. And then I'll just continue on with my civilian job, or civilian education, whatever I'm doing. So for a couple of years, that's what I done. I went to class, worked on my degree. Then I went and drilled, trained on the weekends a couple times a month. And like I said, a couple of weeks here and there throughout the year. And the first big thing came, I was just starting my junior year of undergrad. So that's when you start getting into your major specific classes. Things start to get a little bit more intense, interesting in your degree studies. And I get a phone call saying, hey, we have a rotation going to Germany. We want you to go. It's like, okay, cool. Like, what are the dates on this? Okay, is it over summer break? What's that look like? So it was not over summer break. It was right in the middle of the semester. So I went. So I spent some time in Germany, but I did not stop going to school. I just started the semester several weeks late. So by the time I came back to the United States and kind of got back in Ohio and at Shawnee, I was several weeks behind in classes. And I can just remember the existential crisis I felt going to class and being so far behind and realizing, oh man, how am I going to catch up? And learn everything and then get current. So that worked out. Still ended up keeping my 4.0 at the time. And the real big, I don't even want to call it a clash, but conflict between the military and my school came right when I was getting ready to start my senior year of undergrad. I get another phone call saying, hey, we're deploying. We're going overseas. You're on the rotation. We're going to be gone for approximately a year. So it's like, man, year's a long time. I want to deploy. I want to go serve the country. I want to go do PSYOP in practice, but I also don't want to delay my education any further because I've already kind of punted it off for a year to go through basic and AIT and other things. So I started talking with the university. I started talking with my advisor. I started talking with, the deans over there. And, keep in mind this is pre-COVID. This is pre-Zoom, WebEx, everything being available online. And I asked, like, what if I do this? What if I complete my degree online? I have 2 semesters left. I'm in completely electives. This is something I can do. Will you be flexible with me and allow me to do this? And thankfully, my advisor, or actually 2 advisors, really fought for me and made that happen. So while I was overseas in East Africa, I would do my job, military job, all day, evening, night sometimes. And then whenever I could catch a few hours to kind of distance myself from that, I would go and do school. I remember one time I was in cultural anthropology class, my very last semester. Cultural anthropology is, studying how cultures work and communicate. And it is really interesting. And so I'm reading this online excerpt about East African cultures, and I'm like, I'm in East Africa right now. I can just go outside. Why would I read this from a textbook? Online excerpt. I'm here. I'm living it. I can just walk outside my door and talk to a foreign national. So it clashed a lot, and that's something that really any reservist, any National Guardsman faces. But you make it happen.
So you were in Somalia. You get back from Somalia. Explain what happened next.
Yeah. So while I'm overseas, I get pretty dead set on that I want to go to law school. It's something I thought about at the time, and it was time to put that into effect. So I get back roughly around July, but it's too late to take the LSAT. LSAT being the entrance test that we all have to take before we go to law school. It's too late to take that. It was too late to tour law schools. It was too late to really start for that year. So I knew I had about 12 months before I could really go to law school. So I knew I had bills to pay. I knew I had rent to pay. I knew I had financial obligations. And being back in Southern Ohio at that time, it's, well, what can I do to provide for myself and my family and still try to get ready to go to law school? So anybody back home may be listening to this. You go work at the hospital, you go work with your dad or uncle, or you go out to the prison. And I went out to the prison. That prison being Southern Ohio Correctional Facility. Some people listening to this may recognize the name. It was home to the nation's longest prison riot back in 1993, Easter Sunday. It's still up and operational in Toledo County, Ohio, and Lucasville. And I was a correctional officer there. It was a state job, state benefits, and for Southern Ohio, it pays pretty well. There's not too many places that you can walk in with no experience and potentially make $40,000, $60,000, $65,000 a year.
So you were working at a maximum security prison as a prison guard, a correctional officer, and I'm assuming on a daily basis you got to meet with the Bloods, the Crips, and the Aryan Nation.
Much more than that. I mean, we have the C-Dubs, Cincinnati White Boys, Aryan Brotherhood. We have the Black Gangster Disciples. We have the Latin Kings. We have the Black Guerrilla Gang. Let's see, the Convicted Felons, the Convicted Family, the Heartless Felons. The list goes on, Chuck. You come up with a catchy name, and there's a gang named after it.
and you indicated to me that you were saying that on a daily basis, people would try to. Why don't you just describe what would you encounter on a daily basis? It
was never good. Prison it's a wild place. It's like you mentioned, this was a maximum security facility. So this is really dealing with the worst of the worst. You don't automatically go to Lucasville. You get there by offending and digressing and forcing yourself into that upper security classification. So at the beginning of I work second shift most of the time. So my day would start around 1:30 p.m. and I would go in, and first thing you notice when you walk in one of these blocks is it's hot. It is so hot. You're in your uniform, and you walk in the ranges. You check and look in the cells and make sure that nobody's dead. That sounds grotesque, but that's the first thing you want to check on, because the suicide rate's high, the assault rate is high, the drug overdose rate is high, and the first thing, as soon as you come on shift, you do a ring check, make sure that nobody's dead. And just even in doing that, walking and looking in these cells, you would see some wild stuff. Self-mutilation, just contraband, drug usage. And yeah, I want to be clear that this isn't happening because of lack of effort from staff or prison administrators. It's just the type of inmate that we dealt with at SOCF. Even looking at recreational periods, it's so common to hear across the radio or get told that, hey, there's a 12-man fight down in the rec yard. There's a 10-man fight, gang fight in M1 gym. It's just every day. I've had fecal matter thrown on me. I've had urine thrown on me just because I'm a correctional officer and they're an inmate. It's just it's the Wild West, except not as fun.
You were there, what, approximately a year?
Just under a year. I put in my 2 weeks notice because I got accepted into law school here in Toledo.
You moved to Toledo, the big city, and you start law school, and then you indicated that you decided to go back into the military.
Yeah. I'm a glutton for pain, Chuck. So I leave the prison, moving to, like you said, Toledo, which is not that big of a city, but it was a really big city to me when I first moved here. I got lost almost every time I left my house for the first year. Lots of GPS usage just to get to Walmart. And my first year of law school, which is undoubtedly the hardest, one of the more challenging things I've done, I was still in the Army Reserve. Like I said, I signed that 8-year contract. So I was fulfilling those obligations. And then my time came up, and I had left the military. I was out for probably a total of 2-3 months maybe. And I missed it. You do something for so long, and something that's really special to you and provided so much to you, and something as interesting, great as serving our nation, that's hard to put to the side. And that's hard to completely get yourself out of. So by this time, I completed my undergrad degree. I was halfway through law school. So I started looking around what programs are available for me to come back in, that I can utilize my education, my previous military experience, and even my life experience. And I got really, really lucky. And I had a friend who was also, he's a med student here in Toledo, and he was looking of going into a direct commission program to help get some of his med school debt paid for. And I went with him, talking to a recruiter, and it was like a light bulb. It was like, oh wow, like why didn't I think about this? Well, can I take advantage of this opportunity? So a few phone calls later, a couple of days later, I get in touch with a naval talent acquisition group out of Detroit. And, I'm talking to this guy. He's like, yeah, I think you'd be a great fit, great candidate to apply for an intelligence officer position through our direct commission program. So that's a little bit different than how most military officers get their commission. The most common route is going through an ROTC program or even OCS. ROTC being you do it while you're going through your undergrad for 4 years. OCS being you apply and you go do about 3 months in this pretty rigorous program and hopefully get accepted at that point. Well, I kind of cut through all of that. I submitted a package, and after several interviews, several board evaluations, that was all I had to go through, and I received my commission. So that happened in July of 2021. Since then, I have been serving as an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserve. It's been great. I get to take all these life experiences that I've had, all my educational experiences, and most importantly, my experiences working overseas with troops on the ground, and actually lead sailors now, actually lead mission sets to make sure that we are being as effective as we can, and as efficient as we can to achieve the mission. And more importantly, looking after my subordinates, looking after those appointed under me to ensure that I'm being the best leader as I can, while still serving my nation, my branch, and accomplishing the mission.
So what's your rank, and how long is your commitment currently?
Yeah, so I'm an ensign right now. So you come in the Navy as an officer. That's where you start out as. I should promote. Fingers crossed, nothing bad happens within a couple years. So will be in the Navy Reserve for at least 6 years. That's my minimum commitment with them. But I have no doubt that I'll be well past 6 years. I'll probably eventually retire from one of the armed services. Hopefully I don't make another branch switch. I'll probably retire out of the Navy in another 20 years.
So, one of the things, once again, if you hadn't needed to pay for college, you wouldn't have had any of these adventures.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I always make the joke. And when I interviewed here, Chuck, I think I said it in our interview. And at the time, I really questioned it. And it was, I grew up poor. I never got over it. It's true. You grow up always wanting something, not having something. And don't get me wrong, I was always clothed. I was always fed. I was always taken care of. But, it wasn't equitable to things around me. And because I didn't have those things, and because I didn't have a way to pay for college, I went after things. I get made fun of by my friends all the time because I'm always committing to things. I'm always throwing myself into things. I don't say no enough because I don't want to pass up on an opportunity, because I never know what that opportunity may actually manifest itself into later in life. Had I said no to want to even play football in high school when I was a freshman, who knows where I'd be at? I never would have saw that as my way out. I never would have hurt my knee. I never would have had to go enlist. I wouldn't be here. It's really what you make out of it.
Right. I think it's impressive that you create your own opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so the example is, we didn't have an ad out. We weren't looking to hire anybody. And explain how you got the job here.
Yeah, my previous firm, the work kind of dried up, and I got let go from there right before Christmas, which was really, really not a great time for that to happen. And I knew that I wanted experience, and I knew that I wanted to work for a firm that could utilize me and what I bring to the table. So, updated my resume, and I just started emailing firms. I didn't know anybody that worked here. I had never spoken to anybody at Boyk Law offices. I didn't care. I emailed the main email, said like, "Hi, I'm looking for a job. Would really like to come in sometime." And within an hour, I had an email back, setting up an interview time. And it's just, like you said, it's a good example of, you can get punched. You can take it on the chin and sit there and wait a while, or you can go make something out of it. And it's really up to you. It's really up to the individual. What do you want to accomplish, and how hungry are you to achieve that?
Thank you very much, Jesse, for telling us your story. I think you're just at the beginning of your adventure, and I think there's going to be nothing but success in the future for you. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chuck.